Hello, welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. Mike, it is hours after we normally record. Normally, I will ask you how you're doing on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon, is I think what I normally say, but it is no longer afternoon. It is past 6 p.m. at the time of recording. We had some scheduling conflicts, so we appreciate anybody who's tuning in and checking us out at a different hour. Maybe you're sitting down to eat some dinner. Maybe you are listening after the fact, whatever the case. Mike, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday evening? I guess I should ask you.
This is the late show, so it's gonna get a little blue here because we're on a little later at night. So
I'm loopy already. First of all, by the way,
it's gonna be that crusty adults only show where everybody just boos him off stage because he's just cursing.
It wouldn't be a Jet Press podcast without you referencing The Simpsons in some way.
It wouldn't be watch good Simpsons. That's my recommendation.
I haven't. There's just too many episodes for me to watch. But hey, first of all,
before we good ones, there's not too many.
Before we fully jump in, shout out to Connor Long, our guy Connor Long. He said, "Let's go, time for the Jet Press Podcast." Also, right before we went live, he donated 5 memberships, so we really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Connor. You are the man. And yeah, let's. We hopefully got a good show for you guys. I don't know how many people are tuning in. It's a different hour, but we got a lot planned. Mike, tell them what we got planned.
We got free agency stuff. We got quarterback stuff. We got draft drama. We got pretty much everything. And we got more weekly draft spotlights. So we're going to keep stacking those. You know where to find us on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast. We are there for all those. And I need to get that cough out.
Oh, so, man.
And you know where to find us on YouTube because there's 2 ways you can do that.
Are you allergic to evening podcasts, Mike?
You can subscribe. You can hear me choke out my last breath. If you want to hear me do that, you can subscribe. You can like. Those really do help grow the stream. The subscriptions help. It pushes up the algorithm. Same with the likes. Helps us get, especially when we're live, a lot of likes helps push us up if you're searching just Jet stuff. So there is a business reason behind all this. It's not just us padding our ego. But thank you guys for tuning in. Let's just get right into it because it is already pretty late. So gather around the dinner table, whatever you're cooking over there. I had a nice jambalaya the other day. Maybe you're doing that. Let's do some free agency. Let's do some Jets free agency because we got a pivotal offseason. Doesn't even begin to describe what the Jets have in front of them right now. This is not going to be the last 2 off seasons where it was just star acquisition mode. As fun as that was and all the names that came through to the Jets, some reasons football related, some reasons not football related. It just didn't work out. And now they got to go dig out from under the wreckage that Joe Douglas left for them. So I think they're going to be very modest spenders. But that doesn't mean they're going to completely sit free agency out. And they can't afford to sit free agency out. Devontae Adams is gone. It's Garrett Wilson. Who is the number 2 receiver right now? Xavier Gibson?
It would be Xavier Gibson. I don't even know if you'd call Malachi Corley the 3rd string, like the number 3 receiver.
He might not be.
It could be Irvin Charles, who has a torn ACL, or it could be Brandon Smith, who played 1 game on the practice squad last year. I don't know. It's not good.
They need multiple new wide receivers, receivers. They need another defensive tackle next to Quinnen Williams. They could do with some defensive back help. It's all over the place where the Jets could really target guys. So if we're looking at free agents to target, and me and Justin both got a list of 4 or 5 guys, if I said, you know what, no matter what happens, there's one guy I want the Jets to sign, I'm looking across the league. I'm looking at wide receiver. And typically when you see a veteran receiver of some repute in free agency, a lot of times I could say, well, I'm concerned because what does that team know that the Jets don't know? Why are they on the market? Sometimes it's performance related. Sometimes it's money related. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's neither. But when I'm looking at this market, because it's not a particularly great wide receiver market, at least in free agency, trades might be a little better. DK Metcalf, guys like that. I'm looking at this right now, and the Jacksonville Jaguars just got rid of Christian Kirk. And I'm looking at Christian Kirk, and I'm thinking, could you find a better wide receiver 2 for the Jets right now? For as long as he's been around, he's a 7-year veteran. He's only 28 years old. Before this year is really the first time he's had some durability concerns. Before that, pretty consistent. Couple 700-yard seasons, just under 1,000 his final year with the Cardinals. Goes to Jacksonville and then helps the Jaguars win a playoff game with an 1,100-yard, 8-touchdown season. Super reliable underneath. Good hands. Fast enough to make some plays. the kind of guy who's never going to be a wide receiver one. I think maybe when the Jacksonville signed him, they tried to make him a wide receiver one, and I think that was part of the problem over there. Brian Thomas, they lucked into Brian Thomas. I think they found a wide receiver one there. But at this stage of his career, he might want to contend because he spent 7 years with crappy Arizona and mostly crappy Jacksonville. I don't know why you want to come to the crappy Jets. But if it's just a money thing and the Jets pay him enough, this is the guy I'd want. Because I don't love this wide receiver draft. I don't really love the Jets prospects that land a lot of these trade guys. Like they were going to get Deebo Samuel. They were going to get DK Metcalf. The perfect intersection of realistic and not too pie in the sky. And he's going to cost a good amount, but he's not going to break the bank. Excuse me. Christian Kirk is my guy. I will firmly keep pounding the table for him this offseason.
Yeah, I love it. I think you said what I agree with in that this is not a very good wide receiver class either in free agency or the drafts. I mean, Devontae Adams is probably going to be the top available name on the open market, and I don't think the Jets are going to reunite with him after just releasing him because I assume T. Higgins is probably not leaving Cincy, and I think Chris Godwin's getting re-signed by Tampa. Christian Kirk is a very intriguing option, and I don't think he's going to break the bank at this stage of his career. Also, still only 28 years old. Can still play. He's coming off a broken collarbone where he missed a good chunk of last year with Jacksonville, but still a good wide receiver. I don't think he's going to cost an incredible amount of money. And that's exactly somebody you want to bring in as a true wide receiver too. Like I think he can absolutely still produce at a wide receiver 2 level if the Jets sign him. He's not washed up by any means. He's hitting the market at a very interesting time for him because he can still play, but he's coming off that injury, had a kind of a not amazing year before that. So I'm not sure what his value is going to be. I think a team like the Jets could absolutely capitalize that and take advantage. I'm looking at, let's see, I got a few names here. I do have a wide receiver I'm going to talk about, but not right now. I'll stick with offense for a moment. And I will say this, the Jets need to completely revamp their tight end room this offseason, completely reshape it. I like Tyler Conklin. I have gone to bat for him a lot in the past, and going into the year, I was very high on him, and I thought his potential in this offense could be pretty good this year. Unfortunately, it didn't really happen. He's not a threat as a yak after the catch at all. Got good hands, but if you are not a threat after the catch and you are a piss poor blocker, which he is, no disrespect to Tyler Conklin, he is quite a bad blocker. You're going to struggle to make an impact. I think the Jets really need to prioritize blocking at the tight end position this offseason. I don't think they need to necessarily, unless you're drafting a Tyler Warren at 7, I don't think they're going to bring in somebody who's a high-end pass-catching tight end. I've seen Juwan Johnson's name thrown out there a lot. I like Juwan Johnson. I don't think he really fits that archetype. He's
converted wide receiver. I don't know if he's the best blocker.
Exactly. He's much more of a receiving threat than he is a blocker. One guy who I think makes a lot of sense that I haven't really seen discussed with the Jets so far, Austin Hooper. And we're look, full disclaimer, we're not going to be talking about, at least I'm not going to be talking about the high-end free agents in the market. I'd love for the Jets to trade for a DK Metcalf. I'd love for them to go out and make some splashes.
Those days are over.
Right. The days of the Jets, signing the Tyron Smiths, the Mike Williams, like that's not happening this offseason. You're going to be looking for bargain free agents that can fill roles, possibly ascending players. Austin Hooper doesn't necessarily fit that, but I do think he fills a role. Hooper quietly had a bounce back year with the Patriots last year. That was his best year from a statistical standpoint, really since 2019, which was his last Pro Bowl year. Obviously, he's no longer the Pro Bowl tight end 1 that he was in Atlanta in his glory days, but he is still a good player and also fits the archetype they need. I think he is a very competent blocker who has actually gotten better as the years have gone on. 65.9 run block grade from PFF last year, which was ranked 10th among 85 qualifiers. Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert, by the way, both ranked in the bottom, I think 6 or 7 of all tight ends in run block grade, which, for Jeremy Ruckert, who's supposed to be a blocking tight end, that's not very good. So I think Hooper fits that role. Also only give up 1 pressure on 22 pass block snaps, so he was an effective pass blocker. Didn't get used a lot there. And he has only 2 drops over the past 3 seasons combined. So in his last 146 targets, only 2 drops. He's not a particularly dynamic player. I kind of look at him in a similar way to how I looked at Tyler Conklin, except he can block. And I think probably, like I said, like with Christian Kirk, won't break the bank, will be a lot cheaper than Kirk too. Spot track, whatever it is. They project him at 1 year, $4.1 million. I think the Jets really need to prioritize blocking tight ends, especially if they're going to run a similar system to how Ben Johnson ran his offense in Detroit. If Tanner Engstrand is planning to run a similar offense, they're going to want multiple tight ends in that roster that can block. And I think Austin Hooper, bringing him in, makes a lot of sense.
One thing I like about what the Jets did too this offseason is they brought in, for offensive line coach, Steve Hyden. Steve Hyden was the Lions tight end coach, and in his day, for pretty much his whole career, he was a number 2 blocking tight end who would catch maybe one pass every game. That was his lot in life in the NFL for a very long time. So I think having him just through osmosis, I think it's really going to help the Jets tight ends in the blocking game, because of course they're going to pick Steve Hyden's brain for tips like that. And if you just take Hooper's last 11 games, which except the Jets game where May got hurt, like this was pretty much all Drake May games, he would have averaged 57 catches, 600 yards, and 3 touchdowns, which exceeds what Conklin did last year. And that was with a rookie quarterback and a bad offense and a fired coaching staff. I think there's some legit, I don't want to say upside for a guy that old, but upside in the sense that he could be better than you expect. Better than the back of his football card would say he is for Austin Hooper. So I'm really in on him there. Looking at defensive tackle, because the Jets, I don't want to say they tried everything because they neglected that spot for a very long time, but they tried Lecky Fodu, they tried Javon Kinlaw, they tried Leonard Taylor, who actually I thought looked okay at times, but you can't go into they're not going to bring Fodu or Kinlaw back. You can't go into the year with Leonard Taylor as your starting defensive tackle next to Quinnen Williams. He could be in the rotation. I'm very happy if he's in the rotation. He can't be the starter. So you need a guy who, above all else, can stuff the run, and above all else can eat up space, because you're going to get interior pressure with Quinnen Williams. You're going to get it. So all you need is a guy who just looks okay in that area, and then that'll help everybody out. So looking at the current free agent crop right now, this is a guy we've mentioned before as a Jets target, and I'm going to keep mentioning him. Why is DJ Jones not a Jet? He would have made sense if they brought him in a couple years ago, because his first 5 years of his career, he was in San Francisco. That is Robert Saleh. He was one of Saleh's developmental guys, because he came in, I think he was a 6th-round pick, and now he's a pretty good NFL starter. Again, Robert Saleh defensive development, knew what he was doing a little bit. Then he goes to Denver, and I think he really took off in Denver, especially last year, because the first 2 years those defenses were not very good. Last year it all kind of comes together, and you really see what a good people mover, what a good run stuffer DJ Jones can be. Looking at Jones, again, not going to cost a lot. He obviously has the Darren Muji connection too, going back to Denver, which is huge. If you look even across the league, he just looks like one of the more natural team player fits out there. It just like the Jets need a run-stuffing defensive tackle. He's a run-stuffing defensive tackle who knows the GM. The stars are aligning here for DJ Jones. And again, he's not going to be a complete game wrecker on the inside. He's not going to be Deacon Jones on the defensive line. We're not asking him to do that. We're saying just be even an average starter. Because for a lot of Quinnen Williams' tenure with the Jets, he has not had average starter play alongside him at that second defensive tackle spot. And he's still been as productive as he is with all the Pro Bowls and the All-Pros and things like that. So just getting Jones, for as much as it's going to help the run defense, imagine what it could do for Quinnen Williams to not have to do everything on the interior all the time.
DJ Jones is in that like Hall of Fame class of almost Jets, where every year I feel like we've talked about him like, oh, the Jets should go out and sign DJ Jones. It makes so much sense. We were talking about it years ago when the Jets first hired Robert Saleh, how it made sense. Hey, let's bring in DJ Jones. He could follow him from San Francisco. Didn't end up happening. He goes to Denver, and now there's not the Saleh connection, but like you said, there's the Darren Muji connection. I like DJ Jones a lot. And like I said, or like you said, I think he perfectly fits the archetype the Jets should be looking at for a defensive tackle. I don't want to see any more of the Javon Kinlaw archetypes. I don't need to see that. They have their 3-tech in Quinnen Williams. Maybe they move him to 1-tech this year if they really, because I think he can play 1-tech Quinnen, but he's really valuable at 3-tech. What they really need is a 1-tech, a guy like a DJ Jones who can play nose, who can play that 1-tech role and be a space eater, but not an Al Woods where he's out there and he's a complete liability against the pass. DJ Jones is not a terrible pass rusher by any means, but he's much more well-rounded or he's much more adept to be a run stuffer, a run defender. I like DJ Jones. I like that fit for the Jets. I'd be very happy if they went their move. I wonder what he would cost.
Really quick, as Brian says too, though, David Onyemata has been a one for me for years now. If the Falcons release him, I want another chance. That's a good backup plan.
Absolutely.
I prefer Jones over Onyemata, but because he's a little bit younger.
I was gonna
And
say, how
honestly,
old
I
is
just
he
think right
now?
now he's better. But Onyemata might be the better interior pass rusher. So if you value that, you could grab him.
Yeah, Onyemata's he's 32 years old now. He's definitely known as more of a pass rusher than Jones, but he's not small. He's over 300 pounds. I don't know if they play honestly, if you brought him in, maybe you move Quinn into the 1 tech and have Onyemata play 3 tech more. But yeah, I wouldn't be
I would have liked him last year more than Kinlaw if we're comparing the two.
Absolutely, dude. I was very down on the Javon Kinlaw signing at the time, and I'm very not happy to say I was proven right, but I feel like I'm
He
justified.
was better than I thought he'd be, but still wasn't very good.
Nah, he was what I thought he'd be, which was not very good. But I want to stick on the defensive side of the ball, Mike, because another position group that the Jets are going to really have to rethink this offseason. Maybe they bring a couple of guys back, but they have basically nobody under contract. That's their safety room. They've gone very cheap there the last few years, and they have, I believe, they don't have a single one of their safeties from last year under contract. Tony Adams is a restricted free agent. I think they might look to bring him back. I like Tony Adams. I know Woody Johnson doesn't like Tony Adams, but I do. And there was a report, take it, with a grain of salt, however you want to take it, but it was from Tony Pauline, who reported that the Jets think very highly of Tony Adams and that they plan to bring him back. And he specifically said, and again, this is not my words, that they view Tony Adams in a similar way, or that he can fill a similar role to the role that Kirby Joseph, who was an all-pro safety with the Lions last year, literally led the league in interceptions, the role that he filled in Detroit. Now, again, I don't think that's necessarily saying they think Tony Adams can be Kirby Joseph, but maybe filling that role. Nonetheless, they're going to still need to add to their safety room. And there's a few interesting options out there. I mean, maybe they bring back a Chuck Clark, who I was honestly a little disappointed with how he performed last year. Ashton Davis is what he is. Isaiah Oliver was good value for what they signed him to be, but he's not somebody that you want to really rely on necessarily as a top 2 safety on your roster. One guy that I'm looking at is Julian Blackmon, who is an ascending young player from the Colts. I believe he's 26-ish. He is a versatile player, kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none type safety, where he kind of has played all over during his time with the Colts. He's been a box safety. He's played in the slot. This past year, they moved him really to almost a full-time free safety.
This sounds a lot like Jordan Whitehead, does it not?
I think he's more of a, like, he could play more single high than Whitehead can. He played a lot of, I think he played single high on 30% of his snaps this year, which is more than Whitehead could do. But I will say, one of the red flags with Blackmon, like with Whitehead, he missed a lot of tackles this year. Now, he did tear his rotator cuff in week 1 and played pretty much the entire year with a torn rotator cuff. So I think that likely contributed to the missed tackles. Also, instead of playing near the box, he was playing up high, which it's harder as a safety to be able to make tackles in open space when you have more of space in front of you and you're playing as a free safety.
And they have momentum if they're running.
Yeah, and I think that contributed to it as well. But he also posted career high PFF grade, career high PFF coverage grade. Was a pretty good player and honestly had a arguably career year this past season, despite the fact that he was playing through a torn rotator cuff. He's a rangy enough player that I think he can play free safety, but he's also versatile enough that he can play in the slot, can play strong safety. I don't think he's going to break the bank, and he's also, again, pretty young. So I think SpotTrack projected him at 3 years, $24 million, which is about $8 million a year. That would be probably one of the quote-unquote bigger free agent signings the Jets would make, but he's a young player. He's only 26. I think he's someone that if they think he can fit in that defense for the next few years, he'd give them, honestly, the best safety that they've had in a few years. I don't think he's anything special, but he is I would say an average to above average starting safety in the NFL. And because of that versatility, I like him kind of being like a Swiss Army knife chess piece that they could plug in wherever they see fit. So that's someone I think the Jets should take a look at. Safety market is not particularly amazing this year, but he's someone who I think stands out amongst the crowd.
Real quick, I want to get to a comment from James Hutzler, longtime listener, first-time live viewer. Keep up the great work, guys. Shout out, James. Thank you for joining in. 2 things on Blackmon. Then I want to get to a couple comments from the chat here that I think could be a good talking point. Now, there are 2 reasons that I think Blackmon could really star with the Jets, whereas Whitehead did not.
Yeah.
Number 1, I just thought that defense with Indianapolis did him no favors. I think Gus Bradley's scheme is kind of outdated. I felt there wasn't a lot of talent around him. Felt like he had to kind of do a lot. It was just not a great situation. And the Jets, for as much as we are bemoaning the plight of the Jets here, after last year and moving into the Aaron Glenn year. I still think the defense has enough bones to be pretty good, especially with Glenn coming in. And one of the reasons that I think Blackman could be really good with Glenn coming in is Glenn has always placed an emphasis on tackling. Now, I don't know if that necessarily could mean I'm only going to prioritize guys who can tackle, or I'm Aaron Glenn. If you can't tackle, I'm going to make you learn how to tackle. If it's the latter, especially a former defensive back like Glenn, who was smaller and Blackman's a little bigger, I think if he gets put through the Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilkes tackling camp, there could be some room for improvement there. And then you get the big issue with him kind of knocked out.
Right.
Two points I want to get your thoughts on.
Real quick. On the tackling thing with Blackman, because I looked up the specific numbers. I knew he struggled with tackling this past year, but I want to know how much of it was because, one, he was playing in a position he didn't really normally play before, and two, because he had that rotator cuff injury. The past 2 years, 7.4% missed tackle rate, 8.3% missed tackle rate. He had a PFF tackle grade above 75 both of those years. So it was an issue early in his career, but then he kind of knocked it out. And then this past year it came back. So I do wonder how much of those tackling woes were the injury, were he was playing in a position that he's not unfamiliar with. I wanted to throw that out there before we get to these other talking points.
Butch Davis, our old friend who used to coach North Carolina and the Browns in Miami. Josh Palmer, please. Josh Palmer. I'm mixed on him for a couple reasons. Number one, he gets hurt a lot.
Sure.
Number two, just having talked with some Chargers people that you and I both know, and some other people know, the fan base seemed very down on him because there always felt like he was leaving a lot of meat on the bone. Like, with his physical gifts, he should be a lot better than he is. Seems to be the common thread with a lot of Charger fans. And number three, I mean, his production, he was getting 500 yards a year, and that was with Justin Herbert. So if Justin Herbert's getting that production out of Josh Palmer, I don't know what Tyrod Taylor and or Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, whoever, I don't know what they're going to get out of him. He may just get better numbers because of an elevator role, so just more targets, laws of probability, more catches, more yards. And I wouldn't hate it, but I don't think you could just hand Josh Palmer wide receiver 2 outright. You'd have to pick a guy in the top 50 or something like that for me to be comfortable with him.
I think Chargers fans might be a little down on him because he was a day 2 pick who I think, whenever you have a day 2 pick at a wide receiver position, I feel like fans always attach themselves to that player. And then he had a really good second year at 72 catches, 769 yards. I think Chargers fans kind of expected him to take a leap after that, and he really didn't. I think Josh Palmer is what he is at this stage. He is a good field stretcher who is a good athlete, and he's not the most consistent player. I don't think he's going to be an elite separator. He can play in the slot, but he's more of an outside guy. He's a good player. I think he is a wide receiver 3, like a quintessential wide receiver 3. He's kind of playing more of a wide receiver 2 role in LA because Quentin Johnson is not good at football and Ladd McConkey's great, but that I think he was kind of put in an elevated role, in a role he probably shouldn't have been. I don't know if he's going to get wide receiver 2 money this offseason, and if that's the case, if he's getting, if his market is a little too big because there's not a lot of guys around him, other free agents out there, then maybe I'd have hesitation. But I do like him as a player, and just ignoring what his market value could be, because I don't know what it is, I would like him on the Jets, and I do think he'd be a good fit.
I'm just afraid they're going to overpay and say, he could be our wide receiver. That's the fear I have.
Right. I don't see him as an ascending player. I will say that. I see him as kind of what he is.
See, I want ascending. Or
sure.
if you're not ascending, like DJ Jones, a better baseline than him. And then Dan from New York, any Lions free agents Glenn might go for? Looking at the Lions, because the Lions, really their big guy is Carlton Davis, and I think he might be kind of out of the Jets' price range. They might bring him back for all I know.
If they're not paying DJ Reed, they're probably not going to pay Carlton Davis.
So looking at that, the only guys I could see really coming to the Jets, because it's mostly defensive guys, there are 2 that I could see there being a slight chance. One of them is Levi Onwuzurike. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but
Onwuzurike, I think it is.
Onwuzurike, possibly. Former top 50 pick. They took him and Alim McNeil, I believe, in the same draft. McNeil ended up being the much better player. They probably feel like they can move off him. And a promising guy. I remember, even though he was undersized at Washington, I remember liking some of the athleticism I saw from him, but banged up. He didn't really start until this year, missed an entire year with a back injury. Not a guy you could just hand a starting role to, even though I thought he looked okay. And then another guy is Marcus Davenport, former first-round pick. Really didn't get to play that much in the last 2 years because of injuries. 6 games played in the last 2 years, only 2 with the Lions. But when he was at his best with the Saints, I think there was something there. As kind of a toolsy two-way guy. He plays the run okay.
Yep.
But with Jermaine Johnson coming off an Achilles and Will McDonald, for as good as Will McDonald was last year, you need better run defense. Like, he's just so limited. I don't know if I want to put a guy that injury prone. I mean, the guy's barely played in 2 years.
I know.
So for as good as he is, and as good as the Glenn connection might bring him there, really looking at Detroit, the only guy that I could see making a positive impact on the Jets right now will be Carlton Davis. And I just don't think they're going to end up meeting his price point because he's going to probably cost the same as DJ Reed. And the Jets are not going to probably pay DJ Reed, so they're probably not going to pay Carlton Davis.
Man, I feel so bad for Marcus Davenport. I really liked him in New Orleans, and then he signs basically 2 consecutive one-year prove-it deals, signs the prove-it deal with the Vikings, gets 2 sacks in his first 4 games, and then is out for the year. And then this past year with the Lions, signs a 1-year prove-it deal, gets hurt in the second game. You feel for a guy like that. I do really like him as a player. If he was healthy, I'd be very interested. I don't know what his injury status is. Another guy who kind of fits that same archetype, or not archetype, that same like, hey, injury mold, injury prone, but if he's healthy, I'd like it. Derek Barnes, another Lions guy who missed most of this past year. Big linebacker, but I could see him kind of being a good complement to Quincy Williams if they want to keep him at that off-ball linebacker role. No, hasn't there been talk about him being like an edge rusher too? Like, hasn't he played a little bit of edge rusher? Or am I making that up? Because he's a big dude.
I think they probably deployed him at edge rusher at some times, but not just in like specific packages from what I've seen.
That's another guy that makes sense. And then one other dude, because I did say I'd talk about a wide receiver, and this fits this question. It's a player that the Jets have already been connected to. This isn't me coming up with it. I believe it's been reported by multiple people that the Jets are interested. Tim Patrick. Another guy who has been derailed by injuries for a lot of his career. Now, Tim Patrick, the Jets should not be signing Tim Patrick to be their wide receiver 2. They probably should not be signing him to be their wide receiver 3. Hell, this is a guy who was on the practice squad of the Detroit Lions to begin last year. He's not somebody you want to put a lot of stock in. But I do like Tim Patrick's ability to possibly be like a wide receiver 4. Good player in Denver. So there's the Darren Muji connection there. And then obviously he was with the Lions this past year. So there's the Aaron Glenn connection. Unfortunately, tore his ACL in 2022, came back, was trying to be healthy for 2023, and then he tore his Achilles. That is Jason Verrett levels of bad luck with injuries. But he did, to his credit, finally return healthy with the Lions this past year because the Broncos cut him after trying to trade him in the summer. They cut him, signs on with the Lions, end up playing 16 games for them, 33 catches, 394 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's fine. He is a body to throw out there who I think is a fine possession receiver. The really intriguing part about him is I do think he's a really good run blocker. And I think that that's something, again, the Jets should try to be prioritizing with their skill position players this offseason is wide receivers who could block, is tight ends who could block. Because I really want them to lean into their ground game, especially if they're going to have Tyrod Taylor or maybe even Justin Fields at quarterback. You want to have a good ground game. And I think they have the running backs for it. I think they have the offensive line for it. I think they hopefully have the offensive coaching staff for it. Let's get skill players in here who can block. Tim Patrick fills that role, even if he's someone who's playing 8 snaps a game. If he's out there as a run blocker, I think that could be effective. I'd like Tim Patrick on the Jets.
I wouldn't hate him. He basically was the wide receiver 3 in terms of production last year for the Lions. But again, like we're saying with Josh Palmer, I mean, I don't think Jared Goff is a world beater, but Jared Goff had almost 5,000 yards and 37 touchdowns in Ben Johnson's super crazy creative offense. He's not going to get that as a wide receiver 3 with the Jets. He might struggle to get that as a wide receiver 2 with the Jets.
I don't expect him to put up over 400 receiving yards with the Jets. That would not be I would expect him to be signed to a close to a minimum contract and be a wide receiver 4. And I think because of the Muji connection and because of the Glenn connection, it makes sense for me.
It would stink, though. I get that, GMs use connections and sign for players they're familiar with, but this just feels almost like wouldn't it feel entirely connection-based because it's a Glenn guy and a Muji guy and
connection-based?
I don't know. It just and they're not going to sign a lot of guys. So if they come out of an offseason with Tim Patrick as one of their marquee signings,
I didn't say that. I didn't say a marquee signing. I said
I'm not saying he resorts to the level of marquee, but in terms of how much they dole out, I feel like he might, because I don't think they're going to be crazy active.
You know what I could see happening? I could see Monday goes by, legal tampering, Jets don't sign anybody. People start freaking out. They're like, oh my God, the Jets aren't going to sign. You know how fans get. Tuesday comes around. at like 3 p.m. Signed Tim Patrick. It's announced.
And like, oh, that's your big move.
And
Tim
fans
Patrick.
are like, oh my God, that's the move. They need wide receiver. And fans are all, all the pro, keep Aaron Rodgers, keep Devontae Adams crew. It's like, you could have had Devontae Adams and said you have Tim Patrick, fully acknowledging that's not going to be their wide receiver 2 this year. I can see that scenario unfolding. And if it does, I want to come back to this quote. But that's, I don't think he'd be a marquee signing. He'd be a supplementary piece. Maybe you don't even sign him the first couple of weeks of free agency. Maybe you sign him in April. Hell, maybe you sign him after the draft. If you go through the draft and you still need wide receiver help. I just think he'd be a fine addition, and I can see the role that he would fill in the offense.
Dan from New York, doesn't seem to be any no-brainer moves this offseason. Will be unpredictable and interesting. I'm with you there.
Yeah. The no-brainer moves were after the Aaron Rodgers decision was made, the no-brainer moves were, releasing Devontae Adams. Allen Lazard will be cut ASAP. He'll be cut at some point. Those are the no-brainer moves.
Maybe they get a conditional pick late. Who knows? But probably not.
No, I would bet money, a lot of money, that they're not going to go.
All it takes is one. They're trying, but
yeah, I guess if somebody trades for Allen Lazard, that'd be great.
Garrett Goodlander, I'd love for us to make a run from Milton Williams, the defensive tackle from the Eagles. He was 26 and was the best player on the field in the playoffs. I would too, but he's going to cost a lot.
Money.
He's clearly a guy. I don't think there's a guy in this free agency class where there's a clear example of if you give him a bigger role, he's going to be a star, because he was just so limited behind Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. So he would only play half the snaps every game, but he'd make a play every time he was on there. I know the Eagles probably aren't going to bring him back. I've heard Carolina is in on him. I've heard that the Patriots are very in on him. Not like some official source thing, but that seems like a good spot for Milton Williams. In a vacuum, I'd like him, but it would have to take a lot of moving parts. The Jets would have to do a lot to get up the room to even sign Milton Williams, and even then, I don't know if that's the best allocation of the amount of money it would take to sign him.
I think when you're paying Quinnen Williams top market value, I don't think you can pay Milton Williams that too. As fun as it would be to have Quinnen Williams and Milton Williams, the other
Williams, just have an all Williams defense.
Honestly, you could probably, dude, that's a fun summer idea. What if we just put together like an all NFL team with the same last name?
I think all Williams team,
all Jones, all Smith. Like, I bet we could do it. Side note though, but yeah, I just don't think they're going to be able to allocate those funds to the defensive tackle position when they already have Quinnen Williams. But I do really like Milton Williams, and I like the idea behind it. I think he's going to be a really good player wherever he goes.
Dan from New York, any thoughts about how we address right tackle? I believe RY it means RT, right tackle.
I don't know how likely it is that Morgan Moses is back. I know Connor Hughes kind of hinted that it was unlikely he'd be back. If it's a possibility and he's open to it, I would love to bring Morgan Moses back and then draft a guy on day 2 or day 3. That would be my plan. If they don't go that route, look, I said it last week on the show. I don't think this is their number one plan. I think you have to sign somebody in free agency, some Morgan Moses level type, bridge right tackle.
And there's guys out there.
I would not hate it all. And I want to say this. I said last week when we did when we talked about Armand Membu, I know I said him at
and then he had a crazy combine.
I forgot what segment it was, but I said last week Armand Membu to the Jets at 7 was something that I would really consider and I'd be happy with. And I got some pushback for that. I remember you were surprised by that. I said it on Twitter. People were surprised. Now, literally a week later, dude, I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing everywhere people being like, oh, because after that combine performance, be like, oh, Armand Membu, top 10, maybe 7 to the Jets.
I saw the Dane Brugler had him at 4 to the Patriots, that's ridiculous.
Did I not say that? Didn't I say last week? I think there's a chance Membu's the first offensive lineman off the board. I said that a week ago. I said he could, because I don't think Will Campbell is like the consensus top offensive lineman. And guess what? Campbell came to the combine. Now a lot of people don't think he's a tackle. They think he's a guard. Membu, people think he's a tackle.
I did like his quote, though, Will Campbell, where he said, go look at my tape. There's not one rep I lost ever because my arms are short.
And that's fair. I'm not saying I like Will Campbell as a prospect. I just really like Armand Membu, and I would not hate at all if he was to pick at 7 and you just go all in on fortifying that offensive line, fortifying your running game as much as you can and building around that strength. Like, I want the Jets offense, even if they have Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, I want them to have an identity that they can build around for the future. And I think that smash mouth style of offense that Detroit I mean, I wouldn't call it smash mouth necessarily what they ran, but they had a really, really good running game. And
I wouldn't call it smash mouth. I just think they had two awesome running backs, and they had to devise ways to get them the ball.
And they had a great offensive line, and they had skill players that could block as well. So I think that's what you want to lean into if you're the Jets, if you're looking to follow that Lions archetype.
Well, they also had Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta and Goff, and they had everything else on top of that.
I'm not saying that the Jets are going to be the Detroit Lions offense. They need the personnel for that, but you can still play to the strengths. The thing is, I don't think you're starting from scratch. I think the strengths are already there. The Jets have some of the personnel to be a very good run-heavy offense. They have a good running back in Breece Hall, who, despite coming off a disappointing year, I think is good and I think will be better this year. They have guys in Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis who looked pretty solid this past year. They have an offensive line that is very talented, and with coaching that is not Keith Carter, I think, because so many of the issues with the offensive line last year were communication-based, were scheme-based. And if you just give them a better coaching staff, and the offensive line could be top 12, top 10 in the league. I don't think that's crazy to say, especially if you throw an Armand Membu. So anyway, that's a long way of me saying if Morgan Moses isn't coming back, even if he does come back, I would love Armand Membu at right tackle, the Missouri offensive.
Then don't give in to the O-line sucks fans.
It doesn't suck at all. It's not the biggest priority, but I think it makes sense to build around that strength, and I really do like Armand Membu as a player.
They may end up going quarterback anyway, though, which leads us to Jackson Dart.
Let's have
Mike Sando of The Athletic in his most recent mock draft has Dart going 7 to the Jets, which we had talked about Dart as a guy that I like more than Justin, but I think we both could envision a future where there's some success, even if it varies to the degree.
I want to point out, I'm happy to report, I'm coming around a little. I don't think he's a great prospect, but I think I like him more now than I did a couple of weeks ago.
Well, because most of your concerns, it sounded like were the offense, were the scheme, and then
I mean, all right. I'll give you my take on Jackson Dart first, right? We'll do it this way because we've had the Cam Ward discussion, we've had the Shedeur Sanders discussion. Let's have the Jackson Dart discussion. I think he's a good player. I see what people like about him as a quarterback prospect. He's tough. He's a good athlete. He's got good enough arm talent. I feel like he's somewhat stylistically is similar to Baker Mayfield in the way that they play. He doesn't have quite as live of an arm as Baker does, but he is a similar stylistic player. The issues for me on top of the offense, which, I don't know how he'll adapt to a pro style offense where, Ole Miss, it's not quite as it's not Bryce Petty levels of fake offense, but it's still very simplistic. And I also have concerns about, he's got a pretty slow delivery. He doesn't really have a ton of velocity on his passes. Like his arm is good. It's fine. It's passable. It's not amazing. And so because of that,
average for the NFL, it's right in the middle.
I think it's even more imperative that he's able to go through his progressions quickly. And that's why I'm just like, I don't know. I do have concerns about how he'll translate to a pro style offense. And then also he's really, really struggled to get when pressured, really struggled against the blitz, not even just against the blitz, just when he's pressured. When he's pressured, his turnover worthy play rate doubles, actually ends up higher than his big time throw rate, which that's a red flag for me. I don't think it disqualifies him as a prospect. It's just, I don't see a super high ceiling with him, and I see some obvious red flags that could hinder his ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he can be a starter, and honestly, the more time has gone on, I have him pretty similar to where I think of, Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback prospect, neither of whom I'm particularly high on. I think Cam Ward is a significantly better prospect than both of them, at least for what I'm looking for. But I see it. I could see a world where Jackson Dart is a Bo Nix caliber quarterback. I can see a world where he's a fine starter, maybe even top 15. I don't see a super high ceiling with him, and I see a lot of potential red flags that could hurt him at the NFL level. That is my take on Dart, but I don't think he's a bad prospect.
Dan from New York, he could be worth the round 2 dart throw. Is that intentional?
That's a good pun. If he was there, I wouldn't hate it. He's just not going to be there.
What would you like? What would you prefer? Jackson Dart round 2 or Shedeur at 7?
Dart round 2 for sure.
Dart round 2. 100%.
Okay. But if I thought you were going to ask me if I prefer Dart or Milrow round 2, and I almost lean Milrow. I see. Wait,
it could take your QB4 at 7.
It did. What? Wait, what did we say?
It could take your QB4 at 7 if you still like Ward and Sanders better, and you'd probably take Milrow over Dart too.
I wouldn't take him at 7. I would. That's the thing is, I wouldn't take any of these guys at 7, other than Ward. I'd take Ward in the top 10, but the Jets aren't going to have that opportunity. He's probably going 1 at this stage, assuming that a team trades up, likely the Giants. So yeah, Milroe I just think is a higher ceiling. It depends on what offense they want to run. If they're bringing in Justin Fields, hell yeah, give me Jalen Milroe. I think they can run similar enough offenses. If you're bringing in Kirk Cousins, Milroe's a weird guy to sit behind him, unless they want to go the Ravens route, where, not comparing Jalen Milroe to Lamar Jackson, but when they had Joe Flacco, they drafted Lamar Jackson, and those were 2 incredibly stylistically different quarterbacks. Jets could always go that route with Kirk Cousins and Jalen Milroe, kind of like a Flacco Lamar light version of that. But I don't know. I don't love this quarterback class. I'm okay with Dart. Like, I think he's a fine player, and I get why people are like him in this quarterback class.
I'm not hung up on the pick so much anymore. Like, obviously people freak out when like Daniel Jones is 6. That was ridiculous. Like, nobody thought Daniel Jones were the 6th overall pick. But I've come around lately in that if you really think this guy's the guy, like, don't leave it to chance. Because especially, I saw another report too that the Steelers are supposedly very high on Jackson Dart. So I think there's a very good chance he's not there at 37.
Can he pick at 2.0?
Oh, he's better. He's a better prospecting.
I agree, but I don't think it's that crazy. I don't think he's
I do. I did not like Pickett as a prospect. I also had Desmond Ridder as my top quarterback that year. That was a horrible quarterback.
Yeah, that was that. As for as much shit as we've given this quarterback class, which is not a good class, that 2022 class of biz. That's one of the worst quarterback classes. That's the worst since the EJ Manuel class.
I think Purdy was the only one saving it, and he was that's half luck.
Which was literally the last pick in the entire draft. Was the only quarterback in that. Like, who's the second best quarterback in that class? Is it Ridder?
Probably Ridder or Sam Howell.
It could be, Howell. It's Howell, Pickett, or Ridder, who none of those 3 are like even high-end backups, I would say.
I'd probably go Ridder, but I
was going to lean Howell, but it's really, they're all bad.
And then Bailey Zappi, Malik Willis, Skylar Thompson.
Yikes. Yeah, not a good class.
I was in on Zappi, man. I'll take that.
This class at least has a Cam Ward. I don't think that class had a Cam Ward.
No, it did not. The thing about Dart, too, like, he's going to get a lot of comparisons to Sanders. I like Sanders more than Dart.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that – because I think that Dart – how do I phrase this?
I think Sanders has more traits that translate to the NFL than Dart does. Yes,
but I also think – there's a scenario where Sanders just completely bottoms out and is just like I don't want to say an all-time bad pick, but with everything that comes around him and people apparently think he's arrogant and the lack of mobility, like, people always try to make the traits guys out as the boom or bust guy. Sanders, I feel like, might be the boom or bust guy, because if he shows that he takes a ton of sacks and can't really move, I mean, he could really have a hard time in the NFL. Dart, because he has the mobility, I think that might actually save him a little bit. And I will give Dart this too, mentality-wise. There's a fine line between, like, if you look at the interceptions in the league, obviously you don't want your quarterback throwing interceptions. But there's a fine line between, if you throw too much, that's bad. And if you don't throw enough, it's almost like, well, how daring are you really? Like, how much you really throwing the ball? Might just be a bunch of dump-offs. Dart, who averages like 11 yards per attempt, I mean, he wants to go deep all the time. He's a very aggressive quarterback. And I like that mentality. I like a guy who's willing to take the 15, 20-yard pass over the 3 yards in the flat. Because I feel like that's part of what made Allen, why he worked and a lot of other guys didn't, is Allen had this, like, let me use this super strong arm and throw it 50 yards. Mm-hmm. Dart does. He might have the tools Allen does, obviously, but that mentality is hard to replicate. As Dan from New York says, what past quarterback prospects, do Dart and Milroe compare to?
He said Milton. I thought he meant Joe Milton. I was going to be like, is there the Joe Milton in his class would be what? Tyler Shuck, I guess.
Tyler Shuck, yeah. I would say Milroe reminds me of, honestly, Fields. We're talking up Fields, but Fields is the comparison.
They have similar. Fields was a better prospect, but they have similar weaknesses and similar.
Fields got a better arm. Fields a little better deep accuracy.
Is Dart crazy to say like a Brock Purdy? Like, is that crazy to say? I feel like that's similar enough. He's Baker with a worse arm.
How about 20% less arm strength, 10% more mobility, Derek Carr.
Oh.
Because Carr's got a stronger arm, but I see a lot of the same stuff there.
I could see that. I feel like Dart is more like he's got more like chip on his shoulder than Carr. Carr is very passive, and that has always been one of my criticisms of Derek Carr as a quarterback. I just think he doesn't do enough with the talent that he has, whereas I feel like Dart is more on the other end of the spectrum of maximizing the talent that he does have.
Yeah, I mean, he was like a 5-star recruit who got like $1 billion quarterback.
I mean,
he wasn't like just some plucky kid either.
He's not crazy dissimilar to Bo Nix, even, I would say.
He's not a little better arm than Nix, I think.
I agree. But similar athleticism, similar builds, I believe. Yeah, and none of these are like amazing. I've seen Gardner Minshew for Jackson Dart as well.
I think he's got a little stronger arm than Minshew.
He's also more athletic than Minshew. Minshew's not a terrible athlete, but he doesn't ever use his legs really ever.
I feel like he should use them more, but
probably. But yeah, it's a good question. I do love doing comps. People get bent out of shape about them though, because like people will be like, oh yeah, the Cam Ward comp is like. I mean, I don't even. Lamar.
Did you see the one guy for Tedero McMillan was like he's like Randy Moss combined with?
Shut up.
Who did he combine it with?
I don't know.
Randy Moss and Mike combined with Mike Evans.
yeah, he's the greatest receiver of all time.
Oh yeah. Did you ever see the? I got to take credit for this. There's been a picture that goes around of it's called like running back Frankenstein.
We were about to reference the same thing.
I sent that picture to I believe it was one of the old Draft Network guys. Might have been Solak.
Okay.
And I think he posted the first picture with that. So I think I got to take credit for that. That
you're the one that started. Because who were they talking about? Was it
David Montgomery?
David Montgomery, that's right. And it was like he's got the
feet of Le'Veon Bell, the power of Ezekiel Elliott, the elusiveness of Saquon Barkley, and it's David Montgomery.
Oh, this is the best running back of all time, and it's just David Montgomery, which he's a really good player, David Montgomery. But
Dan from New York, Shedeur gives me Johnny Football, Josh Rosen vibes. No, not like that.
I wouldn't.
Johnny Manziel was an immature brat who never had anything hard happen to him in his life. And
definitely not Johnny Football. Johnny Manziel was another level.
Johnny Manziel's been arrested multiple times for serious things too.
Also, Manziel can only dream of being as accurate of a quarterback as Shedeur Sanders is.
Yeah, Johnny Manziel, didn't he have like 70% completion in his last year at A&M?
But he had a noodle arm. Not that Sanders has an amazing arm, but better arm.
And Rosen is like if Carr didn't work, where he just didn't have that sort of fire you need, but Carr just has enough talent to overcome it. And
Josh Rosen, my take about Josh Rosen, if he came into the NFL 20 years earlier, I think he would have been a good quarterback.
I mean, he also went to. That was just a death zone when he went to those Cardinals teams. He had no shot there either.
He came at a time when the NFL was really shifting away from his mold of quarterback. Not that it can't succeed. Like a Jared Goff is still good, but like. I feel like right around that time is when we saw the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, obviously it's the same draft class, kind of take over the NFL. And Josh Rosen was really just he's almost like the Jaleel Okafor of the NFL. If that analogy lands with people.
He's like the last dinosaur who survived the asteroid.
Pretty much.
Moving on to another Jets quarterback they did draft, Jordan Travis. 5th round pick, I believe.
Yep.
Great career at Florida State. Probably would have been a 3rd round pick, despite his size limitations and his arm thing. Probably would have been a 3rd round pick if he didn't dislocate his ankle. And I don't think he broke his leg, but there was something more than just a dislocated ankle.
It was a crazy leg injury.
It was really bad.
It was like his whole leg.
Who was the dude from UCF? The quarterback?
Oh, Mackenzie
Milton. I remember watching that live. I'm like, oh.
Yes.
It's not that was bad. I don't think he played again after that. Poor guy.
No, I think he retired. Yeah.
Oh, poor guy. But Jordan Travis might be in that Mackenzie Milton area right now because he didn't play last year. Wasn't expected to contribute. The Jets were fine with that.
Depends on who you ask.
They did expect him to at least practice and be with the team at some point. And he didn't do that. And now his agent is starting to needle the Jets a little bit, saying they basically Mekhi Bectoned it, and they rushed him back and screwed him up. Now, and then Jordan Travis doing the thing that all the athletes nowadays do, deletes his anything Jets related from his social media. And I have 2 conflicting takes on this. Number one, I feel like honestly it may have just been bad luck, and Jordan Travis kind of got screwed here. where he just had another setback, was hurt anyway, older guy. They're getting a new quarterback anyway, just not the right time for him. And I feel bad for him, but also this has happened like 10 other times in NFL history where they draft a quarterback in the 5th round as like a developmental backup and he never plays. Like this happens before. It's sad that he got hurt because of it, but kind of them's the breaks. Mm-hmm. Then I'm thinking about it. And you know my feelings on Mekhi Becton, who gets treated as some, amazing comeback story because they put him at right guard, which he refused to do with the Jets because of a bad attitude. This is now like the 2nd year in a row where there's been or the 3rd year in a row even, where there's been the Jets saying, oh, this guy got rushed back from an injury and now he's hurt even worse and can't play. I feel like this has happened more than it should on most teams with the Jets. This is not the first I've heard of this. So I don't know what to make of that. Do you think there's really anything there? Because I've heard way too many the Jets push guys and guys get hurt even more. I think C.J. Mosley had that happen a while back when he got hurt. Like, this is not uncommon with the Jets, sadly.
Yeah, I don't know. This was I'll read the exact quote. This is from Jordan Travis's agent. He talked to Rich Cimini, and full disclosure, I've spoken to Jordan Travis' agent before for something in the past. I forget what it was. It wasn't related to Jordan Travis, but De'Aaron Jackson. Like I know I've spoken to him before, and he was a cool dude when I talked to him. So maybe I'm going to be biased and give him the benefit of the doubt here and assume he's not lying. But he said the quote was his rehab with the Jets was not the best. They tried to rush him. It was too fast. This part after this is, I think, the most interesting part, where he says there was pressure on the coaching staff, and they tried to get him going sooner than the timeline really was. That caused a setback, and we had to shut him down completely.
But for what? So, what pressure would they have to get him back?
Woody Johnson. That would be my understanding of what. That's how I read that. As Woody,
he wouldn't play anyway, so why do you care?
I don't know, but I can imagine a world where Woody Johnson is pressuring the coaching staff, saying, hey, we got to get this guy out there. We drafted a quarterback. Hey, Joe, why'd we waste this pick on a guy if he's not going to play this year? Let's get him on the field. Let's go. I can see that being a world where Woody was kind of in their ears. And I imagine De'Aaron Jackson didn't just make that up out of thin air, that there was pressure on the coaching staff and they tried to rush him back. Again, maybe I'm being biased. I don't know. That'd be my guess. I don't know who to blame with that.
I believe that. The only really, I guess, point of contention is did X lead to Y? Did the pressure lead to him getting hurt again? Or did he just get hurt again in the middle of that?
I don't know if we'll ever know. I also don't know if it really matters, because I will say that the people that made those decisions outside of Woody Johnson are no longer with the team anymore. So that doesn't really matter what Robert Saleh was telling him, what Todd Downing was telling him, whatever Joe Douglas was, whatever that plan was, it really doesn't matter. What matters is 2025. I don't think this should be a big story. Obviously, honestly, it really isn't. It's coming out at a time during free agency where there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, but it's notable enough that we got to talk about it. I don't think this changes anything really with Jordan Travis going into 2025. He is going to go into the spring. Hopefully he's finally healthy. It sounds like he is. In that article, De'Aaron Jackson did give the update saying that they expect him to be ready to go for the 2025 season. I don't know if that means they expect him to be ready for OTAs or training camp or just week one. I'm hoping it's OTAs because, he suffered the injury now, November of 2023. Yeah. So it's a long time ago. Like he's had over
a year and a half for a dislocated ankle.
Yeah. So he's had a long time now. I hope he's ready for OTAs. He's going to be competing for the QB3 job. That's realistically the only expectation Jets fans should have for Jordan Travis. He's not going to be the backup. He's definitely not going to be in the starting consideration.
And they're not even thinking about making him the starter. I've seen a lot of Justin, how many people have you seen say, what, Jordan Travis, give him a shot. Jordan Travis, give him a shot.
There's a lot of people, I think, who think he would have been a first-round pick if it wasn't for the injury, and that's just not true.
Like, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't.
Not have been. He would have maybe been.
If he wouldn't have fell to the 5th round.
Right.
He would have been picked in like this 3rd round if he was a first-round guy.
Correct. Like maybe he would have been a day 2 guy, but he definitely would not have been a first-round pick. So yeah, I hope for his sake that he gets healthy. I hope he's back on the field. I don't really know what to make of any of this quote unquote drama. I will say that it is, I think it's notable enough that he wipes any mention of the Jets from his Twitter profile right after this report comes out. I'm sure that that's probably related and probably not coincidental.
What's he going to do? Demand a trade? Okay.
Normally when a player does that, it means they're upset and they want out. I don't think he has the leverage to do that. So I think he's just going to show up hopefully play, hopefully be healthy. And ideally, best case scenario is he wins the QB3 job, looks good in the summer, and maybe you have a developmental backup. That's the realistic, like, best case scenario for him. Worst case scenario, if he plays. Worst case scenario is he just doesn't play ever again, and that's awful, and I hope that doesn't happen. Worst case scenario, if he plays, is he sucks and he just gets cut in the summer, and then that's it.
Another bad Jets quarterback. There haven't been any of those.
Yeah, man. And day 3 picks, 99% of day 3 quarterback picks are complete wastes, and they don't even develop into like backups.
If you have a guy who's been a backup for 2 years as a 4th round pick, that's often viewed as like a spot for veterans to come in and supplant him. Like, how many, really, if you think about it, how many even long-term backups around the league are like day 3 picks? Like Easton Stick with the Chargers, who's been there for like ever as a 5th round pick. Like, how many of the backups around the league are those? It's mostly failed higher draft picks.
I think that's something that's changed in the NFL, because for a while in the NFL, go back to 70s, 80s, 90s, you'd have long-term backups stay with one team for a long period of time. That was a normal thing.
Charlie Batch, freaking for the Dolphins, Don Strock was their backup for 15 years.
That was a very normal thing. The Jets had a few of those guys too, and it just doesn't really happen anymore. A lot of times, if you look around the league, most backups are failed former top picks. Like that's the majority, or they're journeyman veterans who have bounced around from team to team. Like, those are the two really, archetype. I feel like I've said that word a lot in the show, but those are the types of quarterbacks that you're looking at as backups. If you're drafting a Kyle McCord, say in round 4, right? Like, we hope he can develop into a cheap long-term backup. Well, he's probably not going to be a QB2 to start the year. Probably be a QB3. Maybe he's QB2 in his second year. And if he's not, now he's going into his 3rd year. You only have 2 more years of control left. What's the point of even having the cheap rookie, the cheap backup, if he's not even getting that backup role until his 3rd year? So I don't know. I feel like I've soured on taking quarterbacks on day 3, unless they have like Joe Milton upside, where I'm just like, sure, why not?
I've soured on taking quarterbacks on day 2, where I'm like, if you like him in the 1st round, get your guy. So honestly, maybe just don't draft quarterbacks ever, I think is the...
Unless you're picking in the top 15, don't take a quarterback. And even if you're picking in the top 15, that quarterback's probably going to suck. That's how the NFL works.
But I believe before they got Mahomes, I remember the Chiefs didn't have a rookie throw a touchdown until like the 80s. Like, they went that long in between with that one.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
And it worked for them.
It did.
Weekly draft spotlight.
Let's do it, buddy. We appreciate everybody who's sticking with us, by the way. I know it's after 7:00. This is much later than we normally stream, but let's talk about.
We've done streamed at 12:30 at night after some primetime games.
That is true. But this is on a weekday. A little different.
I am going to take your attention over to Eugene, Oregon, for my guy. Now, when you think about Oregon in this draft, and especially the Oregon defensive line, you think of Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon's going to be a late 1st round pick. If the Jets get him in round 2, I'd be thrilled, but I don't think that's going to happen. He's probably going to end up in like the late 20s. So I love him at 37, but that's probably not going to happen.
I've seen him mocked to the Bills a lot in late round 1. That's like a really common spot for him.
I think that'd be a really good spot for him too. I'm going to look at a guy who might be a little bit of a day 2 reach, but I wouldn't hate it. And a guy who, if they got him on day 3, like if they move up on day 3 to get him, I'm thrilled with. And that is his teammate, Jordan Burch, who is a 3-year South Carolina guy, goes to the last 2 years at Oregon. For all the talk about guys like a Shamar Stewart, where the sack numbers don't match the production, and comparing that against like an Antoine Powell-Ryland, where the sack numbers are too good and they don't end up being the best indicator. Like, Antoine Powell-Ryland's not going to get 16 sacks in the NFL like he did last year at Va-Tech. Burch is kind of in that weird middle ground too, where his first 4 years in college, he had a whopping 8 sacks, and then he gets 8.5 the last year. He's just such a weird player. He's 6'6", 295, big guy.
Wait, he weighed in at 295 at the combine?
He was listed at 295 at Oregon.
I thought, there's no way he was 295. He's an edge, no? Is he not an edge?
That's what was so funny. They put him at edge, and they listed him at 290. He was a straight-up 5-tech edge rusher.
All right, combine at Oregon at 6'4", 279.
That's what he. Okay, so 280. They listed him at 290 at Oregon.
Yeah.
Still 280 as a 5-tech edge.
Yeah.
And he was getting home. He has legitimate speed. Worked out well at the combine. Good speed, good hands. plan of attack when he's rushing, defends the run better than most because he's so big. You're going to get a good edge-setting defensive end there.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, for his size, it's the same Shamar Stewart riddle where he's got such good athletic gifts, and you're wondering, like, why can't he? And it's not even like Stewart, who's played for 3 years. Daniil Hunter really only had 2, 1.5, where he was a real contributor. This guy's played for 5 years in college. 4 of them he started, and he never really. And you're like, why can't he take off? What's holding him back? Almost like Jermaine Johnson in a way, where before the last year, you're like, what's going on? Why can't he really dominate?
Mm-hmm.
So I think because of that, though, he's going to slide a little bit. But that sort of raw toolbox at the point the Jets might be able to get him, like in the 50s to the 80s, that seems like the kind of guy we want to take a chance on day 2. If they don't end up getting like a Mason Graham or a Walter Nolan in the first round, he might be one of my top defensive line targets on day 2.
This is a deep interior defensive line class, and I know he's qualified, he'll classify as an edge or whatever.
He's either. It might just depend on your scheme.
I was going to say, he's your Michael Clemens replacement. That's what he is. He is what you wanted Michael Clemens to be. He is what John Franklin Myers, I mean, I'm not going to say he is John Franklin Myers, but filling that same tweener type role in the defense, I could see that working. And he's
not as big as Muhammad Wilkerson, but there are some. Wilkerson was huge for an end, but there are similarities.
Sure. I think
hopefully he has a better attitude than Muhammad Wilkerson did.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you could tap into that upside that Burch possesses, I think that's what makes him such an intriguing, like, early day 3 guy, or maybe even late day 2, because the physical upside is there. Like, he's huge. He's a pretty good athlete, good play strength, good run defender, the good length. I see the vision with him, and I'd be very happy with him as a day 2. Probably more of a day 3 guy, but maybe if
they get him 4th round. I mean, Darren Moody's going to be doing backflips
for sure.
In the 4th, he might end up a top 60 player when it's all said and done on my board. I'm a big fan, especially because I just don't see, like, there's always guys like, oh, why can't they put it all together? Just, big bundles of football talent. The last year at Oregon, and I know he had Derek Harmon alongside him, but I think you saw him maybe finally starting to break free and figure it out a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think it might really continue next year with the Jets.
And hey, look, the last defensive lineman that kind of, I wouldn't say he's like a similar type player, but another defensive lineman that they didn't draft, but they signed as an undrafted player who very much had the quote of, oh, he just can't put it all together, Leonard Taylor. And I thought Leonard Taylor had a very impressive rookie season, especially for being an undrafted rookie. I would love to see what he could be in that defensive line.
They played him out of position too. They were playing him as like a nose.
I know it's a different story, but it's a similar concept of, hey, really talented guy, wasn't able to put it all together in college. What can he do at the NFL level? Taylor's also a little younger than Burch. He had only 3 years, I believe, at Miami. It's a little different, but similar concepts. I'm going to go to the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think this is an amazing wide receiver class by any means. And I've seen some stuff recently where it kind of sheds light on how many misses there have been on day 2 wide receiver prospects in recent years. There really have not been a lot of hits. It's not just the Jets. I know the Jets have had a terrible history with day 2 wide receiver prospects.
I will, for the life of me, never understand how Devin Smith was not a good NFL player. I don't. How?
Because he had half an ACL by the end of his career. Like, that's why. He had no knees left.
He was so fast. He was.
Yeah, dude. He will. That highlight tape at Ohio State, man. Like
that still might be one of the greatest catches I've ever seen. That one he made. That's up there.
It is. I thought he was really good. Then injuries. But yeah, there's been a lot of day 2 wide receiver misses in recent years. But one guy who I think is going to be good value, likely towards the top of day 2 at this point. I think he really helped himself with a fantastic combine performance. It's Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State. I think if he's there at pick 42 for the Jets, I would be very hard pressed to not take him. I don't even care what they do at wide receiver.
It's interesting because I have Higgins probably like at the end of round 2 for me, and I've been told I'm like too high on him. I'm like, I don't know.
I don't think so at all. I think we're going to start hearing Higgins be I don't think he's going to go round 1. I just don't think it's good. I think some of the receivers are going to fall, which might push him down the board. Because I honestly think Ted McMillan. 4
locks for round 1 with McMillan, Egbuka, Burden, Golden, and whatever you choose.
Here's my. I don't know if it's a hot take. I think the receivers are going to fall. I don't think Ted McMillan goes top 10, and I think the snowball, or not snowball effect, that's the wrong word, but the effect of that is going to be other receivers getting pushed on the board. I could see a world where Luther Borden doesn't go round 1. I could see a world where I think Emeka Egbuka should go round 1. I'd be upset if Emeka Egbuka didn't go round 1, because I like him a lot. I think he's a very good receiver. But I could see a world where only 2 receivers go round 1, which is crazy.
Even after Golden ran that fast?
Maybe Golden sneaks into the back end. I could see the Chiefs or something like that being like, let's get another Xavier Worthy. By
the way, how about Isaiah Bond? I'm going to break the record, and then
I know 4.41 or whatever.
Completely not average, faster than most, but you know.
Well, that's the thing. He shouldn't have said that. Like, if he didn't say that, people would be like, oh, he ran a good 40 time, but he's like, I'm going to run a 4.1. And it's like, all right, dude, come on now. But I can see a world where the receivers fall, and if that happens, I think Higgins maybe he gets pushed back a little bit. But if that doesn't happen, and if you do see 4 wide receivers go in round 1, I think Higgins has a real chance to be the first wide receiver taken on day 2. And I don't know if that'd be at 42. It might even be higher than that. But I do really like Jaden Higgins. Brian said 2 receivers in round 1, but 2 or 3 tight ends. Probably 2 tight ends. I don't think there'd be a third.
Warren is definitely. Colston Loveland definitely.
One. I don't know who else would go round 1.
Fannin
going round 1.
I wouldn't. He's round 2 for me, but Elijah Arroyo, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be surprised by that. Running backs very interesting. This is a really good running back class. Like Genty's going round 1, Hampton's going round 1 probably.
Hampton's not going round 1. To who? To who?
Somebody in the back half of the first round. You don't think is he not the consensus RB2 at this stage?
I mean, both the Ohio State guys are pretty close to him for me.
Okay, Judkins and Henderson are good. They're
I just
very
don't see the speed with Hampton, but
wow.
See, I guess the thing though is, well, that was the big concern for him was the long speed because he's like an old school smash mouthy guy. The thing that I guess this kind of works against it where maybe this will why some defensive line might fall too, because teams will say, well, why would I spend a pick in the first round on a running back defensive lineman when I could get one in the second round? I feel like that might happen this year with a couple positions.
I could see that happening. I almost think the opposite is going to happen, where teams are like, there's not a lot of good, wide receivers in this class, right? We don't really see these guys at a very high level, but we do really like these running backs. We do really like these defensive linemen. And I think teams might just start taking BPA at a certain point in the first round, where they're just like, well, we don't need a defensive lineman, but let's take Walter Nolan because he's a really good player and we just like him as a prospect. We don't really, desperately need a running back, but hey, man, let's pair Amarian Hampton with whoever we got. I could see a world where that happens. But anyway, on Jaden Higgins, because I didn't really get to talk too much about him. 6'4", 215 pounds, ran a 4.47 at the combine, posted a 9.87 RAS, relative athletic score, which was a lot higher than I thought he was going to test. I feel like the athleticism, while he's a good athlete, I don't think he's quite as fluid of an athlete as those numbers would suggest. But because of those testing numbers and because of the size he's at, and he had the production at Iowa State, went for over 1,000 yards this past year, I think he's going to really climb up boards. And he doesn't necessarily fit the exact type of wide receiver that I normally would want to go after, because I don't think he's an elite separator by any means. I don't think it's enough of a weakness to completely disqualify him from being a really good receiver at the next level, but he's not an elite separator by any means. But what he is very big with a huge wingspan, fantastic hands, only 3% drop rate in college, that's nuts. 56% contested catch rate as well. So also very effective in contested catch opportunities. If you remember my criticism of Keon Coleman last year, it wasn't that he just can't separate, because that's one thing, but he also was like 35% in contested catch opportunities. If you can't separate and you're not a good contested catch receiver, what are you doing, man? Like
you looked okay though, to give him credit.
He was fine. I don't want to disrespect the guy because I actually just interviewed him like a month ago, and he was a really cool dude. But he was fine.
Dude, talking all that shit behind your back, then you meet him and you're like, oh, he's a cool dude. Okay.
No one's sending those clips. But yeah, I think with Higgins, I don't have those same concerns with him. I don't think he's an elite separator by any means, but I think he's good enough. And he's also versatile enough that he kind of played everywhere at Iowa State. They played him inside. They played him outside. He might just be better as like a big slot at the next level too, where he can really be a mismatch for the smaller nickel corners at 6'4", 215 pounds. But like I said, I don't think he's quite as fluid of an athlete as those numbers would suggest, which is why he's probably not a round 1 guy. I also don't think he's a very dynamic run after the catch receiver. That's not really his game. But I think he's a good player. I think he's a good prospect. And if you're saying you're high on him, Mike, I think you got to start talking about him going early round 2 because I think that's very possible.
One thing I like about Higgins too. Do you know who his quarterback was? Iowa State.
It wasn't Purdy. Who was
It was Rocco Becht, son of Anthony Becht.
Oh, that's right. Wow,
Yeah.
good connection.
Now Iowa State actually had 2,000-yard receiver. You want to hear how dead even their stats are between him and Jalen Noel, who's probably going to go on day 2 also, maybe like later than Higgins, but probably like, I don't know, in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
87 catches for Higgins, 80 for Noel, 1183 yards for Higgins, 1194 for Noel, 9 touchdowns for Higgins, 8 for Noel. Dead even.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'm looking at the two of them, it's really just going to be whatever you want stylistically because Noel is he's a little bigger. He's like 5'11", 200, I think is what he was listed at. But kind of like that slot guy underneath, good speed. He had like a big 80-yard catch against Iowa. That kind of guy. And then Higgins is on the outside. Not a lumbering guy by any means, but a guy who is not going to be a Mike Evans level, just throw it up and let me get it. Harold Carmichael, boom, long arms. But the kind of guy who, if you get him in the right coaching staff with the right receivers coach, you'll make him learn to be a bit more physical. Because that was one of my concerns with him, was he doesn't really – he's 6'4", 210, and he doesn't always play like he's 6'4", 210.
Agreed.
I call it the Embiid theorem, where I remember watching Joel Embiid in one game, he shot 11 threes. And I'm like, well, he might as well be 6'4" if that's all you're going to do. Well, he might as well be 6 foot or 5'11" if that's how he's going to play. So once he uses his length a little bit more, because he can out of necessity now, but once he becomes a little bit more of a bigger possession receiver, that's when I think you could really start seeing him take off.
I'm always here for Joel Embiid slander. You don't got to.
I feel bad for him. He's not trying to get hurt now. I feel bad for him.
What goes around comes around. Anyway, we got another. Look, I'm a salty Knicks fan who saw him intentionally try to injure Mitchell Robinson.
I'm a Nets fan. My team is done.
I have no sympathy for him at this stage. But anyway, Dan from New York. Interesting question here. Does the running back depth in this draft make Breece Hall a potential trade piece? I would say no.
Nah.
But I'm in favor of the Jets drafting running back, which I feel like a lot of Jets fans might be like, oh, well, we have Breece Hall, we have Isaiah Davis, we have Braylon Allen.
Count me among them. What is this?
Rewind to a few years ago, and I'm not going to say Michael Carter is Breece Hall, but remember when the Jets drafted Breece Hall? And everyone's like, why would they draft Breece Hall? They have Michael Carter. I will say that just because, and this isn't a Breece Hall comment, it's more about Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. Braylon Allen had a good start to his rookie year, did fuck all for most of the season. Isaiah Davis didn't do anything at all at the beginning of the year and then looked solid later in the year. I am not sold on either of those guys being good NFL running backs. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. I don't know. But running backs are very difficult to evaluate, especially with smaller sample sizes. I am not sold on either of those guys being necessarily any sort of an answer. If you get to round 5 and there's a running back that you have like a day 2 grade on, please take him. Absolutely go for it. Whoever that is. I don't know who that would be. There's a lot of running backs in this class that I really, really like. And if you're there, I'm not saying take one in the first 2 days, but if you're there in day 3 and you like a running back, add one to the room. Go for it. It's a great class.
Dan mostly says he's worried about retaining all the big names.
And that's the other part of it is that, look, I'm also not sold on Breece being the guy. I think he had a really, really disappointing second season. And it wasn't just, necessarily his numbers. As my cat is behind me. Hi, buddy. Hi.
The official Jet Press cat makes another appearance.
Hey, buddy. Hi. Hi. You hear the meow?
Want me to take over the show or what?
No, anyway.
Question or what?
I get distracted by my munchkin. It's very cute. Shoot, what was I saying? Oh, it's not just the production necessarily that dipped. He had ball security issues, which though that can ruin a career. Like if you have issues with fumbles and drops, that's potentially backbreaking. And if those continue,
Stephen Ridley when he started fumbling and then he went from like 1,200 yards to nothing.
And if those continue this year, I don't know what the long-term future for Breece Hall looks like, and I don't think the Jets would be jumping to give him a second contract. So I'm not necessarily sold on that. I don't think there's any sure things in the running back room. While I like all 3 guys they have, I don't think that necessarily means I'm going into the draft saying, oh, we definitely can't take a running back, especially because this class is so good. So I don't think it necessarily makes Breece a trade target, but I think you absolutely could still add to that running back room, and I'm not sold on the running back room right now.
I just realized, too, Breece Hall's Iowa State. That's why you need Higgins, because –
that's true. Well, they're getting rid of Lazard, who's Iowa State, so they need to replace him with some Iowa State player. And then they have Will McDonald as well.
Oh, yes. The good folks over at Ames are
the New York Cyclones.
Maybe that's why Matt Campbell keeps getting head coach interest.
Campbell was ahead of the curve. That was the first Iowa State guy they were looking at.
Did you see the Bears that David Shaw's in a passing game coordinator role now?
For the Bears?
Of all the people to be in a passing game role, David Shaw, who ran like a 1940 offense.
I know. That Stanford offense was brutal.
Oh, what were they thinking? But with that, I think we're going to call time on the Jet Press podcast. Different time this week just because of some schedule conflicts. But thank you guys for joining us with the later start. We will be back, I think, at our normal time next week.
It'll be interesting because it'll be right before 4 p.m. on Wednesday is when free agency officially starts technically. So we'll be streaming likely right at that time.
Wasn't that the famed Elijah Moore stream?
I think that was last year, the Elijah Moore stream.
Or 2 years ago, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago when we were streaming and we were talking about, just because they signed Mecole Hardman doesn't mean they're going to trade Elijah Moore. Don't worry, they're not going to trade him.
They trade Elijah Moore. It's literally 10 minutes later they traded Elijah Moore.
They traded him. So who knows?
Remember? Oh no! I remember that line read.
Yeah, maybe the Jets are going to sign Tim Patrick. I'm going to be on here being like, this is their wide receiver 4. Don't worry, they're not trading anybody, and then they trade Garrett Wilson. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Or Malachi Corley.
Well, that one I don't think that would really alter.
What would you get for him in a trade even now? Nothing.
A conditional 6th.
That's that bad.
A conditional 6th if he's on the roster, you get a 6th. It would have to be some conditions probably tied to it because I don't think you're going to be straight up for him. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad, dude.
I feel bad. Gregory Freeman on Facebook, where are you at? That was your guy.
That was. We haven't seen Gregory in chat in a while. It's been too long, man.
Probably because he didn't want to face the Malachi Corley music.
Malachi Corley's rookie season ruined his passion for the Jets.
Okay,
that was the straw that broke.
Everybody gets broken by the Jets eventually. That was his.
Malachi Corley.
Malachi Corley. If he can't work, I don't know.
Fair enough.
Salt the earth with this team. But anyway, thanks for tuning into the Jet Press podcast. Justin, any final thoughts on this late night as we are going to probably get dinner immediately after this?
Yeah, my cat is scratching because he wants out. So let's wrap this up. I got no further thoughts other than tune in next week because I'm sure it's going to be a wild show. We'll be breaking down everything the Jets had already done to that point and anything they might do after that. But until then, thank you all for joining us on the show kind of tonight, I guess. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter, Justin T. Fried. Follow Jet Press and Jet Press. Download Jet Press Podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also become a member today. Shout out once again to Connor Long, who donated 5 memberships to the community right before we started streaming. Much appreciated, Connor. Much appreciated everybody who tunes in, everybody who's a member. You guys know what to do with all that stuff. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Normally, not this week, but moving forward, we will be. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Fried. That's Mike Luciano. Have a good night, folks, and we'll see you guys next week.
So you guys feel like I'm Johnny Carson signing off here. See you folks next week.